and well, whatever. So they gave us a grant to help pay the ICA to do that. And ultimately, they formed. I left after 6 months because I was a single mom and my unemployment ran out. But they formed Independent Fabrication, which was a really high-end, quality, well-known bicycle company, worker-owned bicycle company in New England. But I learned a lot in that process because they were talking about, at the time, most of the businesses that were talking about becoming worker-owned were businesses that were going out, they were going to go under, and like ours in a way. And the workers then came, can we buy the business? We know how to run this company, and the owner is selling out or just running it into the ground. So if we take it over, we can run it. But one of the things we learned in the course of that was, you're sort of setting yourself up to fail when you take over a company that's on the downside, which is what was going on. This group of 6 had turned into 10 people making a bicycle, had a really good reason why it succeeded, in that these were people who were passionate about bicycles and knew how to make them, and that, and they had a small market for it. But on a large scale, you'd end up taking, there was a company in Massachusetts that took over a company that was going out of business. I can't remember the name of it, but Dave.
I know it's Dave Slaney.
Dave Slaney was probably.
It
was a machine shop, isn't it?
What?
It was a machine. It was a tool and die.
An iron.
Iron.
Because he was a steel worker.
Right.
And it was an iron forging business.
Right.
And I think they lasted for a few years, and I think they've sort of petered out. Partly, I think it was partly the nature of the business itself.
Right. They were in a down. They were on their way. They were in that cycle where they're. But what's interesting about the Mondragon is, the idea of it seems if it's coming from an entrepreneurial mindset, and you're going to create something that's needed, and and then you set about creating something new. And then you've got that incubator piece in there. That seems to me to be key to creating new things and then being successful at it. Because
this wasn't my idea.
What was it?
I didn't start out with the idea of starting a machine shop. I worked on cooperative. I like the idea of working on cooperatives, and I was looking at urban farming. I told you, I'm not a farmer. I just wanted to get this thing started. I wanted to help it get going. Someone else, an angel investor, came to us and said, I want to fund co-ops. Someone with a lot of money. And they said, you should go out and buy a machine shop, because that's what you know. Preferably a GE vendor, okay, and make it successful. That's not the way machine shops get started anywhere. Basically, it's a guy in his garage or in his basement with a Bridgeport or a lathe who does it one piece at a time, and he starts a family-owned business, and he has 2 sons, and they take over, right? That's the model. This guy says to me, we want you to start a cooperative. Well, I can't be a cooperative by myself. It just doesn't work that way.
You can't agree with yourself.
I don't get along with myself that way. So I've got to have partners. I've got to have other owners. So I have to start a bigger model than most people start out with. All right. I have 4 owners. So that's 4 people have to get paid by the business. All right, which means that we have to go for higher end equipment. We have to have higher productivity standards right out of the box. There's a whole lot of logistical things that we have to make work right from the start, that they hit the ground running. As I said, this is not a done deal yet, and it's going to take some work to get it off the ground. But we're confident we can do it, and especially if somebody else is paying us. So stay tuned.
I will say that there's, a couple of ways in which co-ops get organized. One is businesses that are going down and the owner sells out to the workers, but it's also worked the other way where owners are either retiring and they feel some obligation to the people who work there, and they work out, you know, something that allows the owner to walk away with something, and for the people who are there to turn the business into a cooperative. There've also been some very successful businesses where the owner gets the bug and says, you know what, let's turn this into a cooperative. And there's a very good one in Vermont called Chroma Technology. They did high-end little microscopic filters for microscopes, and they had a unique place in the market. And the owner said, you know what, this is a really successful business, and they were, I don't know, I think there might have been 100 people involved. And he said, we'll negotiate here. You're all going to buy into the business, and it was a very successful transition for them. You know, and I think the owner, you know, not the least of it, liked what happened because he was part of the business, but it didn't all fall on his shoulders. And you know, it helped the business succeed that everybody else was brought into it.
That's called a transition. There's a couple other models too. There's probably a lot of different models, but the number one model that I talked about was Mondragon. Also in Italy, there's a place called Emilia Romagna that has a lot of small co-ops, and there's a lot of manufacturing co-ops there that work together under a cooperative banking system. That we're just scratching the surface and trying to figure out how they do things, but we're told that's a much broader model that we're going to learn about. The other thing is, I'll get to it just. Anybody ever heard of Evergreen in Ohio, in the Cleveland area? This is something that was brought together out of the need. There's 6 communities out there that are among the poorest, lowest income, no income communities in the country. And within those communities, they had some of the wealthiest institutions in all of Cleveland, if not the country. And what they found out, they did some research, and the mayor of Cleveland threw up his hands. He didn't know how to affect the poverty level in these communities. So what they did was they did some research from the Cleveland Foundation, and they found that these institutions, they call them anchor institutions, were sending out billions of dollars worth of goods and services outside these communities every year. And so they looked at it closely, and they said the one thing that they could really focus in on, and there was some serendipity involved at the time, was the laundry service. And they saw that it was coming up for bid, and that they sent, I don't know what the number is, but millions of dollars worth of laundry services out of the community. They said, well, why don't we form a cooperative around the laundry service for these anchor institutions, which they did. And now they've gone into banking, they've gone into production of solar cells, they have an urban garden. It's not scaled yet, but they're talking millions of dollars there, you know, and it seems to be working. It's another way that's formed out of the need. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say that one of the biggest government supporters of co-ops is Senator Bernie Sanders. I don't know if you know that. So, because he actually worked co-ops when he was in Israel as a co-op farms. He used to go over there. That's where he came from that background.
The Pioneer Dollars, the Pioneer Valley. The government decided years ago not to tax them on trade and bartering that they did out there.
And the Pioneer Valley is a pretty good model in terms of co-op. I mean, it's probably the strongest area in this part of the country in terms of co-ops. They have a group called VOC, Valley Area Worker Co-ops. And there's Collective Coffees, which is a worker-run co-op. There's Pelham Auto, which is an auto repair business. I know that one because my sister worked there when they became a co-op. I mean, it's funny to see how some of these places sort of back into it. And they don't necessarily have a larger vision. It's not like they're trying to change the world. They're trying to change their own lives and find a better way to organize, you know, how they work. And you know, they sort of back into it. And along the way, they learn things that the rest of us can profit.
Well, it's 9 o'clock, and this has been awesome. I just think it's been